Well, what appeared an economic blessing at first has now turned sour for Hungary. The country's farmers claim their profits have dwindled since the country joined the European Union, as the market is flooded with cheap imported produce. They now say they're ready to do anything to save themselves from bankruptcy, as RT's Alexey Yaroshevsky now reports.
At first glance, it looks like a Hungarian success story. 2 decades ago, this farmer started his business with just 4 pigs. Nowadays, he sells 1,500 every year, and couple that with several hectares of sunflower and melon fields. You may think this is a lot, but Andrei says it's only just enough to keep his business afloat. He says it'd have been far more a success if his country stayed away from the European Union.
Now I can only sell my produce to local mini-markets. Transnational companies have flooded my country after EU accession, and they sell cheap meat imported from Denmark and Holland. Its production is cheaper, but they feed their pigs with expired canned meat, while we feed our pigs with corn and natural food. For us, the EU accession was a huge blow.
The pork production industry is one of the examples of how an already ailing Hungarian agricultural industry suffered an even greater decline after joining the EU. And the numbers speak for themselves.
In the late 1980s, there were more than 12 million pigs in Hungary, primarily meant for export to other countries of the socialist bloc. By 2004, when the country became a member of the European Union, there was only a half of it left. Now, 10 years later, the figure stands at around 3 million.
While this particular agricultural sector saw dwindling numbers, some others, like sugar production, even went bankrupt. What was meant to be free market competition turned sour when Budapest was told to play by the EU's rules. The only industry which felt a positive effect from EU accession was local winemaking, with its famous Takai bottles selling well across the continent. But the country's political elites say this is a poor consolation for a country which has exceptional agricultural conditions.
We have everything to be Europe's most powerful agricultural nation. We estimated that the 10 million people of Hungary can feed 30 million in Europe. But in the EU, nobody wants what we produce. At the same time, we've lost all our eastern markets, where we were the primary exporters in the 1980s.
The situation became so bad that at some point the Hungarian government had to act swiftly.
When the floodgates of cheap European farm produce were opened into Hungary, prices for our own milk, poultry and meat crashed, and tens of thousands of our farmers almost went bankrupt. We were forced to implement the toughest legislation in the whole of the EU to protect our own producers.
One of those measures was the introduction of a moratorium on purchases of agricultural land by foreign nationals, amid fears huge transnational companies would swallow up everything for themselves, with no benefit for the local community. It expires next year, and Andrei doesn't understand yet what that would mean for him and his colleagues. But this time he wants to be prepared for a potential crisis and is forced to find new markets in the East, ready to sell even to China if it means keeping the farm alive. Alexey Yaroshevsky, RT, reporting from Hungary.